All right, we'll try to make this as easy and seamless as possible because this is the fun ordinance stuff. All right, yeah, good evening. Everybody knows me, I think from now on, Jason Marco with Amars. Ann Smith is with us from our Water Resources Group. And we've been working on some things that relate to the floodplain within the city limits. So we're gonna do our best on kind of explaining what that ordinance changes, and it's a lot of very high level stuff when it comes to floodplain. And before I even get into basically what has happened is FEMA has updated the flood zones, the floodways throughout the city. But when they did that, they also looked at the city of Benton Harbor's ordinance. The ordinance is from what year?
2006.
2006. So they said, okay, you need to update your ordinance. And I'll tell you why that's important. The building code also has updated. So they wanted the new language of the building code into the new ordinance. So we're here to talk about that floodplain ordinance. It's really need to be, let's see here. If you want to restart or move it off and come back to this.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let me just bear with me on that. I don't want to waste any more time, but yeah, so like I said here, the ordinance is the floodplain ordinance update is needed to do a few things, except the updated firm maps, like I mentioned from FEMA. They have gone through a process of where they've updated them. They will be brought into the entire state of Michigan and the FEMA website and made final on April 25th. Doing this update in the ordinance, we're also designating the city as an enforcing agency, and I'll explain that a little bit as we talk about the ordinance. And then designate regulated flood hazards area under specific provisions, the State Construction Code Act 230 of the Public Acts 1972. So a lot of stuff, ordinance language in there. Designate the city as an enforcing agent to discharge the responsibility of the city of Benton Harbor. So by doing so, basically, if the city doesn't push this ordinance through by that April 25th, homeowners might not be able to get flood insurance at a rate that's reasonable. And people that may need flood insurance now can come back and they don't get the grandfathered in type things that they've already had. The ordinance ends up updating more detailed language to reflect the Michigan construction codes, like I said. So we've revised the ordinance so that it does have the new building codes in there. It regulates all development within the floodplain, which is usually always the case. If a plan set or somebody wants to build, the building inspector here at City of Benton Harbor, now that you guys got some new staff there, would be looking at this when they're building a unit. And then also, they'll be looking at things like putting, grading, septic systems, which you guys don't have any, and, any building or structure in the floodplain. So, for example, just how floodplain, items kind of work. When they built the Emma Hole apartments, that area is in the floodplain. It's right next to the river. So they actually had to specifically work to get that moved out of the floodplain. So they filled that area. And by doing so, they have special permits to do that. The advantage of that is if you get out your unit out of the floodplain, you don't have to provide floodplain insurance. So really beneficial, and also you don't want your dwelling that low. So really, we're looking to move the ordinance ahead to the commission. The FEMA documents, like I said, must be effective April 25th. If the city didn't move it forward, property owners could have suspension of flood insurance no longer being available in the community, which is very high ask from the people that we talked to at Eagle, but that could happen. For federally backed mortgages in the floodplain, the lenders will require people to seek private insurance. So if you didn't provide it, people that are buying homes and getting mortgages, they might ask, hey, you need to get floodplain insurance, maybe on a new purchase. If you didn't have this in place at the city, those would be very high rates for those property owners. There are some forms of federal disaster assistance that would not all be available in any submitted community. So if you move this forward, that wouldn't apply to you guys. And if this didn't get passed by the city, property owners actually could have some of their loans called in question if you didn't pass along FEMA, and they can come back and the people that say, well, wait a minute, you're in the floodplain, here's your floodplain insurance, and it would be a pretty difficult thing for the property owner to address. I just really want to show quickly kind of like what's changed from the maps. And it's kind of going to be kind of hard to see, but I will show as best I can. The difference between the 2006 floodplain, so that's what you see on the screen, and this is just north of the airport area here. This is along Benton Township. You have a little bit here by Riverside Avenue and up there just south of Hickman Park Road. You can see, I'll show another one too of the city. But you can see the kind of general shape here. That's from 2006. This is essentially what's been altered in 2024. It's essentially the same areas have the same floodplain. Not many properties have been added, and not many properties have been subtracted based on the updates. But what has happened over the last couple decades, there has been filling activities. There has been things that people are now out of the floodplain. So that's a majority of the changes along these maps. And bear with me, I know they're tough to see. This is just the area north of the airport. So you can see there's the whole floodway that's just northwest of the airport. Those are some low lands that kind of is outside city limits. And then I wanted to show, I want to show the fourth one, I guess, more. But this just shows more of St. Joseph here, but it also shows that the entire area of where the wastewater treatment plant, Island Point, those are in floodplains. It's in the river. So it hasn't been added or subtracted. It actually it just shows that it's been changed slightly. And then the last one is the one that's within the city. You have the area where the marina is, or the boat launch. The area that's always kind of been underwater there, just by Gray Street. Some of the areas to note is, if you looked at the 2004 one, and I can bring it up if you need to, but like the entire area of Harbor Shores here was underneath floodplains before, based on how they developed those contours. So they had to revise the map to change some things. They've updated what's going on along Ox Creek.
which is very similar to what it was in 2004. But those are kind of the map changes. So it's still, there's no floodplain insurance where there's no highlights or anything. So the majority of the city is not in the floodway, but areas along Ox Creek and kind of the bodies of water is where you're thinking that you might require flood.
Is it Yarborough Park in that area, whole area in the floodplain as well? I know that was being addressed with the Spark grant to address some of those wetlands and low-lying areas as well.
So this area right here.
Yeah, Long Riverview Drive,
Yep.
Gray Street, all of those areas are in the floodplain. And going down Empire, once you get Empire to Gray.
So according to this new map here, the Yarborough Park, it is out of the floodplain here. So that's this location here.
Really? That's really interesting, because that field floods
Well,
across the street.
That's happening though from something different.
Something different.
Yeah.
Because it's marshy and everything.
That's and that's part of what the high water study
Okay.
that we're working with now is trying to address. That's the water table, water coming in underneath the ground, and as the lake level rises, it surges in and starts to show up there. But this high water study we're working on right now is going to be looking at ways to impact that. One thing I would want to mention to you though, show the area around Ox Creek again, if you will.
yeah, with the new one, Mr.
Yeah.
Little? Yep. This good here, or you want more upstream?
Down toward Hall Park.
Oh, yep.
Right down in there. One of the things that for, and most of you are much younger than I, you may be around when this all happens again. One of the things you want to watch for when FEMA does its regular process every so many years, they do flyovers and whatnot, and I'm going to oversimplify it in saying that they'll look and they'll see an area like this that has cattail. You see, this Ox Creek has been there for 100 years and no maintenance on it whatsoever. It just runs all over creation. Now, when FEMA comes through and they do their flyover and look at, and they see cattails over here where it really was Hall Park,
Right.
like our baseball diamond, and other places in there where water has no business. But because no maintenance is taking place, it runs wherever it wants to. Well, that will show up in a map where FEMA's getting ready to upgrade, and if nothing, and most of the time in communities like this, nobody's paying any real attention to that. Next thing you know, it's classified as floodplain, and right now we're going through changes with HUD over our plans for what we're gonna do on Ox Creek, because they're claiming part of this is in the floodplain, including the parking area down there at Hall Park, the baseball diamond that was inundated and that type of thing. Fortunately, we have the Corps of Engineers working with us to assist in addressing some of these issues. But once it gets in there, that's about the only way to get anything done about it, unless you've got a mitigation plan, kind of like what they did with Harbor Shores, that wound up with property somewhere else being set aside, that kind of thing. But I just mentioned that because, what is it, every 10 years or so that they review their maps?
Yeah, it's a while.
Yeah. And whenever they do that, somebody needs to be paying attention. And I know, usually large cities where you've got half dozen people in the engineering department, they're doing that, they're looking at it. But in a situation like ours and a lot of other cities like Gary and so forth, nobody's paying attention. And then you look up and all of a sudden, property that belongs to the city that you ought to have control of, suddenly you don't. but you can't do anything in it, it's now classified as floodplain.
Yeah, and with your improvements that you're doing at Ox Creek, you're gonna wanna keep track of that. And
Absolutely.
that's why Ox Creek is such a big project, because there's a lot of environmental type, things that are happening with the way Ox Creek drains now and floods. I mean, that's what they're studying there. It will flood, it's a low area that, and then you try to control that. But yeah, that's kind of a little background of how they select the maps. But then the ordinance is kind of on its side, is pass the ordinance so the city can change that ordinance so that people that do live along these areas can get the proper floodplain insurance at a reasonable rate.
So, no, can you turn those lights back on? Thank you.
I did turn them on.
Oh, no,
And
just ask them to turn it back on. Thank you.
And really, that's it. That's it. We were just asking to move these two forward, to the full body to pursue. We do have that deadline of April 25th, so we're trying to get everything back to Eagle and FEMA so that everything can be pushed through. And I think a lot of municipalities are doing something similar, which is the same thing.
I'm just out of curiosity, how many properties and businesses and that kind of thing are, the exact count of?
Yeah, and did you have an idea of, we looked at city properties earlier, specifically, I don't know if you have a count. The thing I was trying to explain today, because I figured like, okay, what's the properties? By looking at the two maps, it's essentially the same ones, but I don't have one of that. I don't have the exact property numbers.
It should negatively impact very few, if any, because basically one of the principal protections is when it's adopted, building department has responsibility to enforce it. It keeps people from building in the floodplain where you cannot get flood insurance and creating a problem. And this has been going on gradually and for so long, there shouldn't be many that are being adversely affected that weren't already in the situation. I recommend it go forward.
Is there anybody that have any questions about this item?
I'd like to ask, there's been an ongoing problem, in Ox Creek for quite some time. And, I saw them even working in the Ox Creek area last year. From the brownfield, we could even, voted, money towards the Ox Creek, project. And you said this has to be voted on right away.
It doesn't really impact Ox Creek exactly. The maps have been changed by FEMA already. This is just the ordinance so that the city has the mechanism for the building code and the building department to follow through when somebody wants to build in the floodplain. So like more like properties, but like it's the same thing. If Mr. Little is going through the Ox Creek project and wants to put a building down in the Ox Creek floodplain area, they have to go through the same things, and they gotta think about, okay, I'm building the structure in the floodplain. Number one, if it floods, you're gonna need flood insurance, and that's where people really get, really start looking at it. And that's the Ox Creek, so they're a little different here. The Ox Creek project's one thing, this is just updating the floodplain maps and requirements right now.
So you're saying the school that they eliminated down there, was in the floodplain area?
No, that's not what we said.
That's not the area.
No, this FEMA, so we're updating the ordinance so that we can be in compliance with FEMA's new rules about floodplains. And so this will affect homeowners being able to get flood insurance because the floodplain map was not updated. And so it hasn't been updated since 2006. So what we're doing, all we're doing is updating the map and the ordinance according to FEMA's rules and regulations, so that people who live in those floodplains can continue to get insurance. So if we don't pass this ordinance by April the 24th, is it 25th, we will be in jeopardy of being able to get flood insurance.
So
Be able to build near a,
a floodplain.
yes.
Okay,
So all we doing is
What I'm trying
updating
to
the
do-
ordinance.
it's just trying to see exactly, I can see a lot of things on the map, but just to see exactly what is considered as the floodplain area, I was trying to pick up the Ox Creek area, would it consist of,
No, so mostly it's along the river. So it's mostly along the river, Gray Street. There's parts of it in the township, where the airport is,
Ship Canal.
the Ship Canal, anything that butts up against that river. The Imogene Hull Flats was in the floodplain, but because they did some work to build it up, with their engineering company, so they built it up away from, so it wasn't in the floodplain anymore.
If-
But Imogene Hull Flats, so all of the properties, the water treatment plant, all of those things.
so all of that area is
In the
floodplain?
floodplain.
Those new homes and all over that, in that area?
They were, but they did work, so that wouldn't be.
Yeah,
No, it's
it's
great.
value in going forward with it and nothing to lose by not, if you don't do it, you got problems.
It's updating the ordinance, adding.
I just wanna know if, does this address redlining?
No, has nothing to do with it.
Nothing.
Any other questions or clarifications? I don't think, just to move this forward to the full body. Next item.
Thank you.
That was all one thing.
He grouped them all together.
Everybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am, go ahead. So, anything else on the agenda?
Last month's legislative, meeting, I'd like for, Mr. Little to explain to us clearly what he meant about the sidewalks would be the residents', responsibilities about that. I'd like that to be clear so that anyone that asks me, I can clearly tell them, and also that I will have the clear understanding also.
I had just printed out that article from our code of ordinances just before it came up, but I wanted to take and highlight the sections that you want to pay attention to. I will scan that and hand that out to all of you tomorrow so that you can actually, if you want to show it to anyone that wants to see it, it'll show you exactly what it says. But
You couldn't explain to us?
oh, yes, I'll be glad to. Basically, when a property owner buys a house, even though the typical road right of way is acquired from the middle of the road, I think 33 feet to each side of it, or something, maybe yards. But in any event, that right of way, even though it belongs to the city, that typically will include back of the curb and the sidewalk. You get the same situation in the rear of the house with the alley, all right? Even though the alley right of way belongs to the city, and even though between the back of the curb to sidewalk belongs to the city, by ordinance, it's the responsibility of the property owners to maintain that. You'll find in that ordinance language to the effect even that if some development's taking place, that the manager has the authority to order that the property owner build the sidewalk to specification, which, if I recall correctly, shall not be less than 4 inches deep, and that type of thing. But same, and there's an overlap because there's a vegetation ordinance also that deals with things like limbs, unsafe limbs growing out over the street or over the tree lawn, and same thing in the rear of the building. When we clean up the alleys and whatnot, it's not for people to just come right behind and dump stuff in because it's clean, now fill it back up. Or let weeds and branches and stuff grow through the fence out into the alley. It's their responsibility to maintain that, to cut it and keep it clean. Same thing in the front. If a limb on one of these trees that is in that tree line is in need of being trimmed and falls on somebody and hurts them, they don't sue the city. They sue, no, they shouldn't, because the ordinance says that it's the responsibility of the property owner.
One other thing then, why is it that they getting, we voted and got a, city income tax? And I was on the board when they set it up, that was implemented to take care of sidewalks, alleys in the streets. And then the trees was even designated for, ever since I knew, they put X's on those trees, and they had to come in and take them off. They said you couldn't remove nothing that belonged to the city. You have to have authorization from the city to do these. So it's confusing that you do certain things that they say this and you jerk them the next way. People are not happy about this because this was the reason they got the city income tax.
Not entirely. The city income tax is to be used to improve infrastructure. And that is determined by the city. If, for instance, let's say the city was cleared a block out and was getting ready to have a new housing development put in there, the city could choose to put in a new sidewalk around there, because at this point, it's either the city's or property that the city's working with a developer on, and that may be part of what the city decides to do in order to incentivize and help that development get going. But that doesn't mean the city has to do it. The city could also require the developer to do it. But that doesn't eliminate or relieve any property owner from their responsibility to do it. Now, I hear what you're saying about the confusion. We just spent $500,000 doing sidewalks in the city there, and that really was the responsibility in some cases of property owners. We're doing that because the situation had gotten bad enough and far enough along, and there are enough empty spaces in between that it would be difficult to get a continuous improvement done like that under the present circumstances that we have. So the city elected to do it. And in fact, we did it with CDBG funds.
Well, the city itself has got a lot of violations because there's a lot of city-owned property got sidewalks tore up.
I hear what you're saying, but understand what, again, use an example of what we just did. Would anybody have preferred that when we went down these streets that we only replaced the part that was in front of city-owned property and then told people, now you got to do your part and you got 60 days or 90 days to do it?
But in the original document of the city income tax, that's what they had on there, that it was the sidewalk.
It's permissible to do it, but it's not required to do it. It doesn't relieve anybody of their responsibility to do it. That doesn't mean we can't come in if we choose to and do it.
She's gonna send a document out.
Yes, I'm gonna send it out. And once you've had a chance to read through it, if you want to discuss it further, I'll be glad to. Because this isn't unique to Benton Harbor. I've operated and worked in government in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, California, Colorado, and Florida. And every one of them, it was the same.
So I think the issue, in my opinion, is just more about getting the information out. I don't think the residents really know.
That's,
So I think that's more of the issue. We have an ordinance already, I mean, it's just, do people actually know? Like, I know, being a resident here for the last 5 years, I have common sense, so I know about the lawn, I know, or the tree lawn, I understand that, but I would not have known that a cracked sidewalk would have been the resident, so I just think it's about getting the information out. 'Cause I don't think many know that.
and even not dealing with just the tree line and the alley, but just something that I know most people don't know. If you've got a tree in your yard and your limb is growing over the neighbor's house, now, I've known many instances where a neighbor comes over and tells you, you gotta get this tree trimmed. But under the law, it's their responsibility to trim that tree that's over there, that limb over their house that comes from your yard.
When you cut it off in their yard,
You cut it off at the property
it's
line.
not a place, I'm sorry about that, when it's my turn. Anybody else want to say something?
Go ahead, Mr. Dunbar, no.
We need to fix that, because the citizens plan to fix it with the city income tax. No, that was,
No.
now you can't tell me what the citizens wasn't trying to do, you can tell me what you're trying to do or not do. But you can't tell me that the citizens, no one knew that if the sidewalk in front of our house started getting cracks in it, that it's our responsibility to take care of it. That was never said to a citizen in Benton Harbor. If it was, then I'd like to hear that, and from those people it said. But I got a tree right in front of my house. The roots are tearing up the sidewalk in front of my house. But I take care of that whole stretch of property between my house and the next house. I make sure that limbs, all of that would fall off, that the city don't take care of at all. I make sure all of that stuff is taken care of. Now, my whole purpose of signing that document, trying to get city income tax to take care of some things for us, it was for that particular reason. And taking care of, we take care of ours, the city's supposed to take care of theirs. If something happens to that tree and it falls, they're not gonna come pick it up. They have not come and pick it up. They will not come and pick it up. So I'm saying with the sidewalk folk pulling up from the roots underneath that tree, that's not my responsibility. And you can say, show it to me in writing where it says that that's my responsibility, and then I might have a different outlook, but it won't change my opinion. The city is sidestepping its duties when they don't take care of those trees, when they're overgrown and over the street. They didn't fell out in the middle of the street, and it took hours to get them to come and get it out of the street. I'm not making no sense to anybody, but if it happened in front of your house, how you gonna run out there and pick that big limb up and move it somewhere? If it tears up the sidewalk in front of your house, you gonna get out there with your money and pay for getting it fixed just because it's out in front of your house? We don't have that kind of money. And that's what the city income tax was for. That's what every citizen I know that signed for it was agreeing to and hoping that we had solved that equation. But now here, all of these years later, you come where the city is telling us we gotta take care of that. And I wanna ask you commissioners to change that ruling or whatever you call it to favor the citizens, because it's not favoring us right now. Because I can not afford to take care of that sidewalk in front of that house.
But excuse me, but one of the reasons I brought this up, seems like it's double dipping to me. That was the reason for getting the city income tax in, to take care of streets, alleys, and the street, and sidewalks. That was originally what it was put in there for. Seems like it's double dipping when you say, this is what we're gonna do for fixing sidewalks and things. And now you're saying it's the responsibility of the residents. But then, if I own property, it's my property. Why is it that anybody can walk on my sidewalk going up and down the street? It seems like that's my private property. My property, I can say who can come on it or who cannot. And I can put a sticker, private property. So if the sidewalks is my responsibility, how is it that any and everybody can walk, have a pathway under here?
I just have I understand what you're saying, from both perspectives. I just have a question. Was there at any point in the city's history, that, I know we had a lot of services that had gone away, that we used to, take care of, because officially a city's responsibility is to provide protection, collect taxes, are two of the main duties of a city. Everything else is like technically extra things in most communities, but one of the two is protection and collect taxes. So everything else is added. Safety. And so some of the other services are added. But just in our history, I know we used to do a lot at different periods in the community, and sometimes we'll provide services based on funding. And that could have been one of those services that went away at some point. That's what I'm asking.
Typically, city government has always attempted to balance the scale when it sees something happening that it can do. I mean, probably isn't a city in the country where a situation comes up, it's clear property owner's responsibility. But Miss Mary, who's there, is in a wheelchair. She's 80 years old. People know that she's city go out and do it, but they don't have to. And the situation with cities like Benton Harbor, as things have gotten worse and gone down, the city has picked up and done more and more and more. But what that does is just aggravates the situation they have financially already, because the more they do, the more they're expected to do it. And people feel, just like it's being said, like it's a city should be doing it. And I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's almost like when state trooper pulls you over and says you were speeding, and you say, I was only doing this, and he says, speed limit, here's this. And he says, you say, I didn't see it. So you're still responsible. And all kinds of laws on the books that people may or may not be aware of, but that doesn't relieve them of the responsibility to comply.
Here comes a people issue here. Now, when I first came up in government, that was the standard practice. They said that from the middle of the street to all the way to your property line, you were responsible for. I never read that, but every city manager I had contact with told me this. When I finally read it, and my goodness, but by that time, we were in the late 70s and the 80s. There was no money. Everybody's crying broke. It wasn't happening. So the city came with compassion, and they created a sidewalk program, hired some of our people to learn how to do sidewalks. They chose areas to do sidewalks. At that time, the mayor's mother was living on the street, and they did that sidewalk. and other sidewalks that was privy to someone. So when we ask the same question about how do we fix our problem, everyone, if you really paid attention to what we talked about for the income tax, that was to relieve the residents from the financial burden that they were in. Now, of course, politics came involved in it, and someone wanted to put the emergency component in it, that if we needed something for emergency, we could go in and get that money. Some of us commissioners were fighting against that. And some of us, the ones that won, 5 of them said, no, we're gonna put those kind of emergencies in there. And if you look at that money, the biggest portion of that money was spent on emergencies. So I'm saying to us as elected officials, elected by the people, that we have to find if that ordinance is very displeasing and harmful to our citizens, let's change it. Let's look at it and change it. There's no reason why we should have another burden on a low-income community for no reason when there's money in community block grant money, there's money in other avenues that we do not have to put a burden on our citizens anymore. We have to look at government in a human infrastructure, especially in a community that has suffered travesty of racism all their lives. Thank you.
So I have 2 comments. The first one is for Mr. Little. You mentioned that you worked in several states. So
Yes.
if you could, in 1 second, confirm, you're saying in all the states you worked, this has been standard? And then the other comment is, it seems like several people have said they thought the city income tax covered this. I'm a little confused on, it's in writing what the city income tax covers, so where's the disconnect that everybody thought it covered this and it really doesn't? But it's in writing, right? So I'm a little confused on how there's multiple people saying, well, we voted on this. Well, how did you vote on it if it's not active, it's not in the writing? And then finally, I do agree, the proper procedure should be to change the ordinance. If it's not in the city income tax, how can we can't put it there, but that would be the proper procedure, to be to change the ordinance.
The disconnect is that because you pass an income tax and indicate its primary use will be infrastructure improvements. Infrastructure improvements include streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, parks, parking lots, whatever infrastructure the city owns. And nobody's income tax is going to be enough to do everything. When I mentioned some of that history, let me just mention East St. Louis, when I started working for them, had a population of 80,000. It was the second largest city in the state of Illinois, behind Chicago. We went through the same kind of downturn. Just because these communities get to a point where they become poor communities, don't mean they want to stay poor forever and change all of the rules to keep themselves poor. When it had 80,000 people, it wasn't a poor community, not by any means. But certain kinds of policies and certain kinds of thinking took effect. It had the effect. You think about if suddenly all of the things that normally people were responsible for themselves in the city are now put on the city to take care of. You're getting less revenue. You're spending more money, and it becomes a cycle that goes downhill until suddenly you aren't able to keep up with it. Your city starts to look bad. People move out, and the process starts to just go down.
Gentrification.
In this city, you've got the potential, if you build new homes and rebuild your population and so forth, you won't necessarily have to, you will have poor areas in the city, but your whole city don't have to be poor. That's just like when we talk about community development block grants funds. We're allowed to spend block grant funds to do a variety of acts. Now, first off, there's a rule in the law that says cities will not use block grant funds to displace stuff that they're already responsible for. But the exception is in an area where you've got people who are below the poverty line, you can do things like sidewalks, cut trees, do that kind of stuff in order to try to help not only the direct benefit of the people who are beneath the poverty line, but also that community to help keep it balanced.
When he's finished, I'd like to say something.
Okay.
Sisters, let's revisit, we should revisit a whole lot of things. We should revisit that and change it. You know, we should, it's just like this floodplain you guys were talking about earlier. The emergency manager came in and sold off our property without any citizens being involved in it at all, and everybody is okay with it. And we just go on with the fixing of Arch Creek and all of that on top of how they just smashed all of our ideas, smashed our, what they call it, master plan. We were never in that. We never got any of the things we asked. Everything we asked for, you guys find a rabbit hole to jump through to keep us from getting it. You don't want to fix the street, just say you ain't gonna do it. That's what you've been saying all of these years anyway. I just think the citizens were looking to make a change, and we did. But the big eyes and the big U's change everything around, turn it back to where it's our responsibility. In that paper you talked about emergencies, that's what the hell we got. Why don't y'all act like it? Because it is an emergency. You guys fix it. I'm pointing at all of y'all up there. Y'all fix that because the citizens can't pay for a sidewalk out in front of their house. That's out. You guys ought to be old enough and wise enough to understand that and not have to have a old citizen talking about fixing a sidewalk out in front of his house. It's bad enough having a drain out in front of my house making all kind of noise all through the night, keeping me woke up at night, but nobody can fix that. You guys will have to fix something, and I've been asking for a long time, asking you guys to understand where the citizens coming from. Now, I want to demand you guys do what we citizens need you to do. It's not asking a lot to be part of that emergency to get stuff done when you can go downtown and fix anything you want to fix. Please solve that equation for us. put it to a vote. Ask the citizens. If you don't want to do it yourself, ask the citizens how they feel about it and put it to a vote. That's how we had to do the medical marijuana. Nobody wanted it here. Now it's here. You got all that money the other day, put that into fixing our sidewalks. That's put it with the emergency money and fix our sidewalks. Don't have us sitting up thinking about having to fix a sidewalk in front of our house.
Could I
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
possibly
No, Commissioner,
mention,
yeah. Then I'll let you- Commissioner.
One of the things that I remember, and I think Commissioner Henry was here at the same time, that during the time that they got this city income tax in, we had an finance director in that I thought was doing an excellent job, but the money was moved without his knowing. And that's where the big conflict is, us having a finance director in here to monitor the monies being moved from one place to another. So I'm saying that with that, we can see that things is not as it should be, that it's kept up with down to the narrow part where that money goes and everything. We need to have more accountability what this was originally set for and how it's supposed to operate. That money is supposed to have been put in for the streets because the streets was tore up, as a lot of them are still are. And that money is supposed to be used not only for emergencies, it was an emergency actually for our streets. When you get your car damaged because you hit a hole or something like that, that's an extra responsibility for us to try to get our vehicle fixed. The streets still all tore up. So the alleys are all torn up. I can understand. Once if things is fixed, it's up to us to try to keep it up. But the sidewalks for years has been deteriorating. Many of the city-owned properties is tore up from the floor. But then they'll tell you, even they have someone to monitor, even a lot of places of business, that they got to be up to date and this and that. You go out here in the hall, you got plaster falling from the wall right here in the building. Other things through this building is tore up. You putting responsibilities for others, but then you're not an example of what you're putting forward. So it's up to us as commissioners to research a lot more than what it is, instead of just at the last minute something comes up, then we vote on it. I think we got to do a lot more research, because when we ask those people to vote for us, that means we're gonna be a voice for them. And we're gonna be compassionate and reach out and make sure that things run much smoother than what they have in the past.
And I also think that, as commissioners, though, we also need to do our due diligence to get the correct information, the right information,
Of
the right
course.
understanding of the information before we start saying stuff that's half truths and all that kind of stuff, and spreading misinformation and creating dissension and creating division in the community because people don't understand. If you get an understanding and you're able to explain it to them, that will cut down. Like now we're talking, I'm here
Right.
now to get, so we can get an understanding. So then when you're talking to the public, you're able to explain in a way that they can understand, that they're not confused, you're not confused, and they have a better understanding of what's happening.
That's right.
And so that is one of our roles as well.
And that's why I'm asking for a clear understanding now,
So I will sit down with
so
Alex
that we
and have
can,
him go through, sit down with Ms. Lisa in that office, because it's separated, so that those two departments are separated. The income tax, we have to create a separate office, could be kept with the other finances. There is a separate tax office, so you probably can go down and sit with Mr. Alex and Ms. Galladay to get a great understanding of what's going on. They probably could pull up the books, you're a commissioner.
right?
And look at all that information, so there's no, because right now we're having a conversation on stuff that you have questions about, and we can't really show it to you.
Well, he
So,
brought it up in the
But I'm
last
saying,
meeting.
but it would
That's
be
why I
better
brought
to
this
set up a meeting with him, Ms. Galladay, go sit down and see those differences in those books.
Right, but there's no secret, because he
No,
brought
there's
it up
no
last
secrets.
week. That's why I'm openly bringing it up now, so that others can hear. What is it that him giving a clear understanding? Because everybody don't receive the understanding of it as clear as the other, but it's coming right from his mouth, then that's documented.
if I could just, one moment here, and I was on that same committee, I wasn't there when it first started, but I was on the committee also for the income tax. But what we're missing here, and I'm not advocating for pushing anything, I'm simply explaining what it is. Your city, I came here back in '84, had about 6,000 housing units. You now have somewhere around 3,800 active housing units that people live in. Now, let's go along with me here and follow the numbers. 2/3 of those are rental houses. Many of those rental units are owned by people outside the state. Because I'm seeing the information every day. As a matter of fact, Shelley White was in here today, and I was looking at some notices we got on some properties. And went in, and she looked at them, and this one's in New York, and this one somewhere else. Those are the folks that this ordinance, if enforced properly, those are folks who'd be fixing those sidewalks. Renters don't fix the alley, the curb, the property owners. So, and to make the point even more so now, I mentioned CDBG dollars being used in our minority neighborhoods because they're low income. If I were to take any part of those CDBG dollars down there and by the houses next to Gene Clark Park or whatnot, feds would be all over us because that's not low income. We've only got about, I believe, something like 4 or 5 census blocks that are not low income. It's not going to stay that way forever. As I said, right now, property owners out of that approximate 3,800 units, you've got maybe 1,400 that would be affected by this ordinance, that would have to pay to fix their curbs and whatnot. Renter's not gonna do it. We'd have to be citing those property owners. And again, another mechanism that is available to government and not unique to us. If we cited the property owners that fail to do these things, government has a power to go in and do it for them and put a lien on that property to keep the thing balanced. So when we start to fight against that law, because we think it'll affect us, when in reality, it's not. Find me 10 low-income people in town who fixed a sidewalk in the last 15 years, and that the city made them pay for it.
I named 3.
I said, how many to ask for you to find? That was my point. That was my point. You have to understand that you're talking about the whole process of government being able to function. And once you're trying to undo these ordinances, you'll find out, just like I said earlier, once you get past the one with sidewalks, it goes into something else. Then there's a vegetation ordinance that also has this, and then it goes on and on and on. But I'll be glad anybody wants to take time and talk about it.
No question. I'm gonna bring it back to human infrastructure, and then I'm gonna leave it alone. Human infrastructure.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
If I can just say, and all I get it understand. That's why I want to understand straight from the lipstick.
But I think you ought to sit down and have a meeting with him and Ms. Galladay, who is in the tax office, and with the, with, assistant city
I
manager.
understand that, but I'm just saying, I need to get an understanding which direction to go.
I just, one other question to you, Chair. You have 2 seats vacant in your committee. There is applications in the clerk's office and the city, mayor is determined not to, interview those or even consider those people. And I'm having a problem with it. I'm saying there is an
No,
application.
I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm saying, okay. And, okay.
So for you
Cause there was no.
not to have, for you not to have a citizen representative here, we need
We
that.
do need a citizen representative.
So do you go to the city clerk's office and look at the application and please do not make a personal judgment of anybody any resident that want to be on a board. And since the mayor won't do it, will you please go and bring it to your committee? Because there's some people that wanna be on your board, and he's not addressing it.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.